I am really excited to be sitting with Bob Burnett, the CEO of Barefoot Mining. Bob is a computer and internet veteran, and he is in Bitcoin and he is in mining and he is deep in this space. I'm really excited to sit down with him, tease out what it was like to really be deep in both the early internet and now early Bitcoin, talk about the comparables, talk about Bitcoin mining, talk about some details on the dynamics of the Bitcoin economics and what makes the whole machine go. And then we're going to talk a little bit about his business, Barefoot Mining. I want to hear about the thesis and history of the operation. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Bob, welcome to the show. How's it going, my man?
I'm doing great, CK. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you calling me a veteran and not an old timer or something like that. But the truth of the matter is, I've been around a long time. So, I have some stories to tell. And as you said, I was involved in technology from going back to the very, very early days of the personal computer, even before the internet. And so, I'm excited to be here in the Bitcoin world though now too.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, I really do think that people who have seen the internet explode and the infrastructure get built have a really, really unique and probably more accurate perspective on Bitcoin, just because they've already seen it happen once with kind of everything that you were a part of. When we were first kind of getting to know each other, you talked about how you were at Gateway and me growing up, Gateway was the first computer we had in our household, and I just had to learn more. And immediately at that point, I was like, hey, I got to get Bob on the show. But I guess why don't you tell us a little bit about, your career, kind of, getting into hardware and from going from there.
Yeah, I started in the computer arena in 1979. Um, I was in high school and I had a very progressive mathematics teacher. Shout out to Cornelius Fowler if he's still out there somewhere. But he pushed the school system to get at the time, which was the best personal computer you could get, which was a Tandy TRS-80 Radio Shack product. And so I started coding, and that kind of fueled my enthusiasm for that. And I ended up going to school, getting a degree in computer engineering. It's kind of a hybrid of computer science and electrical engineering. I was actually honestly more of a software guy. I did some early AI work, uh, did a lot of work in like operating systems and compilers and that sort of kind of low level coding, a lot of assembly coding, that sort of stuff. And when I got out of college in 1986, it was a tough job market, and I only got two job offers. One was with the National Security Agency to be a spy, the whole story there, and the other was with a company called Zenith Data Systems. And Zenith was an early company doing PC development, and uh, by a stroke of luck, I was the by far the most junior member of a design team that was developing what I believe to be the first true laptop computer. And we were fulfilling a contract for the Air Force. We sold 275,000 of them. And but that really got me into the personal computer arena and in the very, very early days. And then I spent 6 years there. Didn't like the direction of the company technically. So did a startup with a few other guys from the same company. We raised some money from the Japanese, Mitsui and Sanyo, and this was in 1991, and we raised 15 million, which was a lot of money back then. And we're working toward the design of what we called a sub notebook computer, which was a 1 kilogram product that ran Windows. And we had enough money to develop the product, but when we got to the point of bringing it to market, we didn't have the money to do sales and marketing and customer support. So we took the angle of trying to find another company to brand it for us. And through a long course of events, it ended up being Gateway. And Gateway ended up basically buying not only the product, but buying the company and me as part of that. And I started the laptop division at Gateway, helped grow that to about $1 billion division, and then ultimately became the chief technical officer there. I was part of the team that took Gateway public, and when we grew it to a $9 billion company, Fortune 200 status, and that was really a ride that I never expected that I would have. Very, very exciting. So I did that until the mid 2000s, and then moved on and started a technology incubator. But it honestly, I kind of started losing my luster through part of that, and then in 2017, we can come back to this later. I found Gateway. I found Bitcoin, founded Barefoot, and now I'm as active and enthused about work as I ever have been, and I'm 59.
I mean, for me, Bitcoin gives me so much energy in the workplace, and like I feel as though hiring Bitcoiners is almost like a hiring hack for organizations, especially if the Bitcoiners have the correct skill set and you're not making a ton of compromises on that front, because they're so passionate and they're so driven. And on the weekends, they Bitcoin on their own, and that is, having positive effects towards, the business and the workplace. And it's almost like if you have a Bitcoiner on board, it's like almost like a built-in influencer and advocate that's just built into the employee, which is, working at other startups is just absolutely not the case of the
Yep.
average employee. So I feel the same energy too, Bob. But the Bitcoin
Yeah.
energy is incredible.
Yeah, it's exactly what I had in 1986 in the personal computer market, because we knew. I know this will sound funny, especially to those of you who might be a little younger, but it was not obvious in 1986 that the personal computer would become, there'd be one in every home and one in every school, and it would become a ubiquitous part of society. They were a niche product, a very expensive product. They probably held the same place in society that Bitcoin holds today. People were aware of them. They didn't really understand, the general public, why they needed them. Most people couldn't envision owning one. And I think, we're kind of at that same point in Bitcoin now. And, the personal, I like to say, you talked about it, about the internet. There's a lot of people that draw analogies between Bitcoin and the internet. Was actually the personal computer is its own kind of exponential growth. And I like to say it was the base layer of the internet. That had the personal computer explosion not occurred, we would have never had the
Yeah.
explosion of the
Well,
internet on top of it.
you needed the internet on people's, or sorry, the computer on people's desks for then you to start networking them and
Yeah,
create the internet.
yeah. And I think, interestingly, I mean, it was a lot of numbers that we kind of play with in the Bitcoin world, where in the early days, the global market for personal computers in the 80s may have been 10 or 15 million a year, and it was almost business like oriented and very enthusiast. But it was in the point in the early 90s when the global volume started touching like 100 million people, 200 million people. It was right in that range when the vector changed, and things started to change in the way that society accepted it, and then the internet kind of lopped on at the same in that same period, and then it started its own growth path off of that. um but I think all of us that were involved in that time, going back to the point you made, like, we believed, the rest of the world didn't, but we believed, like, we knew that this was going to be world changing stuff, and were passionate about driving that forward. And so I never turned, just like you say the Bitcoiners never turn off. Back in those days, I never turned off. So if it was Saturday or Sunday, I was still doing something to make computers better, um and then of course, as you said, the internet lopping on.
So, we kind of got connected because of the Bitcoin conference. And, you had done a video where you talked about a conference that was happening in Vegas back, throughout the entire personal computer evolution and, seeing that evolved and the parallels between Bitcoin. Can you talk about, I right now am very thankful that I'm in this era of Bitcoin because I feel like I can still shake Michael Saylor's hand. I can go and have a conversation with these different movers and shakers, and some point into the future those people are not going to be reachable anymore, or they're going to be much more difficult to get their attention because they're working on so many different things. They have been elevated to this new level when Bitcoin itself elevates. So I'm kind of curious, you've kind of seen these cycles of success, almost like, what was it like early days engaging with like a Steve Jobs or something like that, at one of these events back in the community era of
Yeah,
personal computing.
yeah. Well, you're right. There was an event held annually in the personal computer industry called Comdex. It was held in November every year in Vegas. And in the early days, late 80s, early 90s, it was a show of 10, 20, 30,000 people, very much like the Bitcoin conference has been the last couple years. And at that period of time, you could go out and you could see and interact with anybody. There would be celebrities walking the floor. The thing you're specifically referring to was, I can't tell you the exact year off the top of my head right now, but I was walking the floor and there was a company at the time called Next, Next, and Steve Jobs had been fired from Apple, and he had started this new company called Next and hadn't rejoined. And I was walking by the booth, and there he was standing by one of his computers with nobody there. And so I was just able to go up and spend about 20 minutes chatting with him, more engineer to engineer, and had that kind of conversation. I had a similar conversation with Michael Dell at his booth. And I think we're still at that stage where, as you said, you can go to one of these shows. It's still intimate. The people within the community may know certain people, like a sailor in our community or a Jobs in that community, but they weren't celebrities. They didn't have status outside of that community.
Niche celebrities.
Yes, yeah, very niche. Because I actually just said that to somebody recently. I was actually in Prague at a Bitcoin conference in Prague, and Sailor was there, and some of the other people were there, and I'd say it must be interesting for some of those people because they're on the conference floor and mobbed, and then they go out into the general streets of Prague and they can walk through with complete anonymity. Nobody knows who they are. And having had a chance to interact and be friends with some people who have become very famous, several people who became billionaires. I just because of I was so early. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of them. Not that I'm complaining, but I got to meet a lot of people who became billionaires, and their lives changed dramatically. Through the course of that. So I think we're at this. We're kind of at that same stage though right now, where that's where we are. We're just on the cusp of breaking out, because what happened with Comdex was by the mid 90s, by 95, 96, there were 100,000 people showing up at the show. By the end of the 90s, 200,000 people showing up in Las Vegas for one show. Those of you who have ever been to a conference in Las Vegas, it's so big, it took not only the entire Las Vegas Convention Center, but several of the hotels were secondary locations where there were exhibits and speakers, and it was impossible to see everything. And we'll see where we end up in the end, but I won't be surprised if we go through a period where we have the same level of excitement and traffic.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's what the Bitcoin conference is building towards. We think that there's going to be a single pilgrimage for the industry, and as Bitcoin ascends, that is a potential very positive outcome for the industry event.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I when I did some of those materials that you referred to, I think one thing I should say too is, you know, there's a certain group of people within our community, and I everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I respect it. But no, there's a reason for people to come together. So if you're a Bitcoiner that says, well, I don't want to go to one of those events for whatever reason, you know, if it's purely financial and you can't go, I completely respect that. But if it's because I don't know, you feel you have to be so anti-establishment, or somebody speaking at the conference that you don't agree with or something like that, I honestly would highly recommend that you reconsider it, because you know we all live to one degree or another in a bubble. You know, we have our virtual world of Bitcoiners that we interface with through Twitter or listening to podcasts like this or things like that, but we're very insulated, and then when we go out, we're often kind of by ourselves. And it's kind of like church, almost no matter what religion you're part of. People say, hey, you know, there's a reason church exists. It doesn't have to do with your relationship with God. It has to do with like connecting with people. And I think that's what conferences like the ones you guys put on are important for, because they create that community. And then you go there and you spend 3 days or 5 days with these people, and you know you're not alone. And obviously, hopefully, you meet people, you get relationships, maybe you learn a little bit, and then you can go back out into the real world, and you know people can call you idiots or not understand you or whatever, but you at least know, hey, there's somebody back there that you actually shook hands with or gave a hug to or a high five or something like that. And that's really, to me, that's really important. Don't underestimate that.
No, I totally. And for me, a lot of people ask me like, how do you like become an executive at a Bitcoin company? And for me, it was really discovering Bitcoin and then immediately engaging with the community and finding places where I could meet with them. So I went to a couple conferences, I went to meetups, and I was just trying to shake hands. And some of the connections I made in those very first moments are still connections I carry with me to this day. And there's no way I'm at Bitcoin Magazine if I don't go to the North American Bitcoin Conference in January 2020 or January 2018. That just doesn't happen. Like I don't even hear about Bitcoin Magazine, right? So that changed my career. Definitely changed Bitcoin Magazine. So it's just crazy to think about. So it's so important, and you know, if you've been to these events, the access you get is unparalleled, and you've already shook hands with that Steve Jobs already. You've
Yeah.
met with them. You got to hang out. You got to shake hands and meet lots of other people as well. It's usually like a flurry of
Yeah.
excitement, and the who's who and the up and coming. I remember meeting Ben the Carman when he was still in college and contributing to Wasabi Wallet. This is now one of the most prolific developers building on Bitcoin. I remember those moments. It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And, you know, I want to lop onto what you were saying about, you know, your career and your experience, because again, there's a parallel. When I got out of school in 1986, if I had gone to work as an engineer at a traditional company, let's say I went to work for General Electric or Ford Motor Company or something like that, I could have had an okay career. But I, because I went to an industry that was just growing, I was not, there weren't all the experience in the engineers in the world that had good paying jobs. They didn't want to go work in this industry that was an unknown. Like that was too scary for them. So it was a lot of really young people. Um, and and so I ended up getting opportunities to prove myself way faster than I would in any other industry. So I ended up being the CTO of a Fortune 200 company. There's only 200 of those in the world, and I did that before I was 35 years old. I was about 33 years old. If I was
Wow.
at Ford Motor Company, I probably wouldn't have even made a manager by that point, you know. Because there's so many people with so much experience. And so the great thing about something like Bitcoin is you probably will get a chance. It's up to you to prove you can do it, right? But if you can find your way in somewhere, you'll probably get a chance that you'll never get in any other industry. And now you got a chance to ride a wave that probably is once in a lifetime. I view myself as like ungodly lucky to have, I was in the personal computer industry, and then I kind of blended that into the internet, and to even have had two opportunities to be in those industries is a miracle. But now for Bitcoin to be here and get a third chance, but for everybody out there, this is probably it. But statistically, if you're, let's say you're in your 20s or your 30s, there's not, it's highly unlikely there's some other thing that has the impact on the world that Bitcoin will be. So if you feel like you might want to get involved, well, damn it, do it right now. And there's nothing wrong with being a baker or a carpenter or a plumber or whatever. But if you want to be part of something that really changes the world, you got to go for it. And Bitcoin will welcome you, and you'll find your way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that one, you probably are extremely lucky, but two, you know how to pick them, right? Like, right major, right expertise, went to the right industry and able to parlay that up. And, a lot of people in your position were riding off Bitcoin, right? They did the
Yeah.
exact same thing as you. They were at the top of the personal computer and internet stack. They saw Bitcoin, wrote it off. That's the most common story. So
Yeah.
tell us about like your Bitcoin story. Why did it give you energy? Were you able to see it when other folks in your cohort didn't?
So I won't bore you with the first time I missed it, because I did dismiss it the first time in 2012. Had a massive mining opportunity and didn't understand it enough. And just say I missed it and didn't pay enough attention. The second time, I was fortunate that I got in, but I got in like a lot of people and through the back door, basically through a shitcoin. And but in my case, even a more unusual way, through a shitcoin, where I got a phone call in 2017. It's actually interesting. I was sitting at home one evening. I think it was about 9 o'clock at night, and my phone rang, and I looked down, and it was an Seattle phone number, but it didn't have a name, and I was about to ignore it. And my wife, who's like really instinctual, she said, "Answer that call." I said, "I don't want to. Like, I just want to watch TV or whatever, you know." She said, "No, answer the call." So I answered it, and there was a guy, and he said, "Hey, Bob, I'm such and such. Do you remember me?" And it was an ex-Gateway person. And I said, I had remembered him. He said, "Hey, can you design? I need 300 Ethereum mining servers. And can you design and build that for me?" My first reaction was, "Well, why don't you just go get them at Dell?" He said, "No, no, you don't understand. These need 8 NVIDIA GPUs, and all that was embedded in the conversation." I said, "Okay, well, let me take a look at it." Well, a little piece of history: NVIDIA, when they were a startup company, the very first company to design their silicon onto a motherboard was Gateway. Back, I don't know the exact year, 92, 93, something on that order. And me and my right-hand man for the president of Barefoot, Keith Thomas, who was a former head of desktop engineering, we called NVIDIA and said, "Hey, do you remember us?" They did. Said, "Hey, if we design these machines, would you give us the chips?" And they said yes. They were grateful for what we had done for them in the early days. So we ended up taking that order. It was a $7 million order. Those of you might remember, a unit like that was going for like $6,000 at the time, and we sold 300 of them in one swoop. And then we went to other people and said, hey, do you want to build, we designed this system, do you want some? And a lot of people started saying yes, but only if you'll host it for us. So we then had to create a hosting operation. And then we saw that they were making a lot of money. And we said, well, let's take the profits and put the money into our own mining equipment, which we did. But honestly, we were looking at it as computer guys with a fiat mindset. As a sidelight, I do have a degree in economics too. And in 2001, 2002, I became disillusioned by the financial system. There was an internet bubble that burst right around that period. It cost me a lot of money. I was very disillusioned, and I found Austrian economics then. So, I'm a guy kind of looking at this with a pretty good technical skill set, but also an Austrian economics bent to me. And I looked at Ethereum for the first time, maybe in early 2018, and realized I don't like it. I saw a lot of warts, and then I looked harder at Bitcoin, saw things that I liked, and we started pivoting the company toward Bitcoin. We signed an agreement that year with Bitfury, which is a manufacturer of mining equipment. Some of you, especially in Europe, might know of. They're certainly a much smaller player than MicroBT and Bitmain, but they provided equipment. And Barefoot Mining became the US distributor and service center for them in 2018. We started then building out our mining infrastructure. And ultimately, where we sit today is, we're a privately held mining company. We specialize in small to medium-sized mining operations. I'll explain maybe more about that in a minute. And we mine primarily for ourselves and investors. We do a little bit of hosting still, but mainly family and friends and associates. We're not out trying to become a major hosting player. We want Bitcoin. We're trying to mine as much Bitcoin as we can, and we're trying to build these really efficient small to medium-sized commercial operations on purpose, small to medium-sized.
What in mining gets you most excited?
Well, I believe, mining is the heartbeat of Bitcoin. And I operate my company within the ethos of Bitcoin. I try to live within the ethos of Bitcoin. And I get to touch and feel and be part of making this engine work on a daily basis. That is really exciting to me. And I also view myself, originally, I was very private about, like I think a lot of Bitcoiners are. I wasn't seeking big audiences or things like that. But I realized a year or so ago that I probably needed to change that, and I've become more public. I've been doing a lot more things like this. I'm writing more. I'm doing a lot of those sort of things because I realized that I'm not saying I'm smarter than anybody else, but I've lived a lot longer than a lot of other people, and I think I'm seeing some things about the industry that I can impart some guidance and wisdom from having gotten the shit beat out of me through these other these other industries, and hopefully make us a little smarter as an industry. So I like to say I like to evangelize and teach. And that's really important to me too. But I do want to say too, I mentioned that Barefoot Mining focuses on small to medium size mining operations. And I'm very much a contrarian, I think, to where the industry trend is. There are a lot of the fanfare, a lot of the voices within the mining community come from big public mining companies. And, they build what I call elephants. They build big and powerful mining sites, but they tend to be slow to grow. They take a long time to develop. And they're very difficult to move, and they're easy to hunt. So I can clearly see that what we're doing in Bitcoin is a threat to not only the financial infrastructure of the world, but the power infrastructure of the world. And my view is that we will continue to come under attack. There's a lot of people trying to create and play nice with the politicians, and I really appreciate that. I support a lot of those groups, but that's not going to be universal. That will go for a long time. We're going to see waves of support and lack of support, or support and attack, support, attack. And I believe that one of the dangers of the mining industry is moving to where only the elephants exist. Because if we live in a world where, let's say, all the mining, or 99% of the mining, exists in 100 fixed sites around the world, I go back to that, they're easy to hunt, and we're going to get hunted legislatively. We'll get hunted through taxation. We're going to get hunted through regulatory legislation and taxes. I believe, I hate to say it, I believe at points in time we're susceptible to things like environmental attacks. And I mean that in the literal sense. Like, I will not be surprised if at some point in the future we see environmental activists take physical attacks on the mining infrastructure. And so anyway, I think it's really important that what I call the horses and the rabbits get a nice set of sites developed over the world with geographic diversity, with different power sources, and we're going to have to insulate ourselves from the eco-terrorists and from the politicians and from these sort of groups in order to stay resilient. I did an article, it was a year ago or so now. It's called Satoshi's Heel. I won't go into it in here, but it's published in Bitcoin Magazine, and it goes into some technical detail about what happens if we build a network that is, just like I've said, that's 99% sitting in the hands of highly centralized organizations, and how the network can be impaired.
So, do you think that that is the trend, and is that a pretty big threat right now? How would you judge the concentration of mining hash rate in public codes?
It is increasing. It's hard, as you probably know, it's hard to get stats in our industry. But they being the bigger guys have really taken over a lot. The small to medium-sized companies that were private got hurt real badly in the last 2 years. They had it really bad, because what happened was, when the China mining ban happened, the big public companies, which either had capital or they had access to credit instruments, went out and essentially bought all the equipment. And they locked out what I call the rabbits and the horses, rabbits being home miners and horses being companies like mine, which I specialize in the development of sites from a few hundred kilowatts to a few megawatts. That's the space I like to live in. And it was very, very difficult for anybody that wanted to expand to even get equipment. And if they could get it, it was grossly overpriced, because the big mining companies had essentially overpaid. And it was almost like an oligopoly. And I'm not accusing them of anything malicious, because I don't think there was malicious intent. but the effect was that way. The effect was essentially of the big guys buying the market up and making it impossible for the small people to even participate. And I respect that we only have two suppliers effectively, MicroBT and Bitmain, and they served their big customers first, and there was nothing left for anybody else. And the prices went, hash price was just absolutely ridiculous. So,
Still is.
well, yeah,
I mean, I guess prices are going. Bitcoin price is going up now, but
Bitcoin price is going up, but back, let's say, so in the fall of 2021, 18 months ago, say an S19 100 terahash per second unit for an individual buyer, somebody buying in small quantities, was like about $12,000. And that same unit is about 1/10 today. It's down around 12 to 1,500 bucks now.
come back down to earth a lot.
Yeah, but it's too late for a lot of the companies. We lost a lot of the people, and there were no press releases. There were no like that didn't happen, right? And I'm not here today to just slam them all, but like what happened with Core Scientific, I honestly think they have gotten a free pass for the damage that they did. They did phenomenal damage to the mining industry and Bitcoin in general. They overbought, they over leveraged. As I think everybody knows, they were hodling all their Bitcoin in their corporate treasury and then leveraging it. And so the first thing they did was they drove up, by buying all the Bitcoin mining machines, they drove up the price of those to places that nobody could effectively mine with them at those prices, and they couldn't get them even if they wanted at those prices. Then they weren't able to deploy those systems the way that they were supposed to, the way that they had planned. And then when price went down, obviously initiated initially, I think a lot by the Celsius Voyager stuff, they got caught with their pants down because the price fell from 60 to 15, well, 20 at that time. And then hash rate was still going up. So this perfect storm occurred. Then between June and December of 2022, they liquidated 15 to 20,000 Bitcoin into the market, suppressing the price further. So that second wave, the whole wave from, I shouldn't say, I'm not going to blame them 100%, but they were a big part of what happened in the second half of 2022 was because of what Celsius or what Core Scientific did, and it hurt. That was the death period. We're proud that we made it through, but what we did was we have a philosophy of never taking on debt. I shouldn't say never, but we did not want to have debt. We never leveraged a lot of the things that I think a lot of Bitcoiners would appreciate, the principles that we applied, and it's restricted our growth. But we're growing within a risk tolerance that we feel we can manage properly. So, but kind of back on these, there's another thing that I think is really important. Like in Bitcoin, we have this. We talk about like using stranded energy. So I'll give you an interesting stranded energy story. So I told you we developed these small to medium-sized sites. Well, a lot of times there's energy out there at cost-effective prices, but it's not massive amounts. And so here's an example. We do most of our mining in southeastern South Dakota. We found a industrial park that had a few companies go out of business in it. And so we went and started talking with the local electric company, as well as some of the companies in the industrial complex, and realized there was about 2.5 megawatts of energy that was available, that was no longer being utilized at a really good price. And so we went to a burrito factory that happened to be very close to the substation. We rented the backside of their building, the parking lot of the backside of their building, and we plopped 2 containers down there, and we're mining in the back of a burrito factory. with 2 megawatts. Now that's all we can get there. Um, and some people would say, well, that's not worth it. But in my mind, I would rather do that 50 times and get to 100 megawatts that way than have one place, because what I'm doing is, by having 50 of these 2 megawatt sites scattered all over the place, some of them in burrito factories, some of in the parking lot of a sports facility, whatever. We have a facility in South Carolina where we bought an old textile mill that hadn't been operated for 20 years. This is an off-grid opportunity, and we raised the money and re-engineered and rebuilt the whole hydroelectric infrastructure, and we mine off the grid about a megawatt that way. So, that's our plan is, to not only diversify for the sake of our company, but for the sake of Bitcoin, to create, all these different sites, different power sources, different areas of the country, and, make sure that 99% thing never happens.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that your philosophy is really awesome, and there's a lot of miners who are also building with kind of the same mindset. A lot of people talking about going off grid with the gas wells, but you just finding any area to arbitrage and just bringing containers there. It's so smart because hey, that deal's no longer there. Okay, like no sweat off your back. You just move the container somewhere else. And hey, maybe that landlord is not being nice. Maybe that power provider is being mean. Like if you have one, sunk cost, easy to hunt, like you said, it's much more attackable. And on the flip side, it's pretty badass to think about like, hey, I'm going to like a restaurant, and little do I know, there's actually like a Bitcoin miner who is like arbitraging energy in the back.
Yeah.
Something like that could be happening, and you'd never know it. It's pretty cool to think, and it's cool to see like Bitcoin being much more under like a cloak, and mining being something that could be kind of done a little bit more discreetly, and seeing that done at scale with Barefoot, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's I appreciate that, and that is what we're all about. And I hope that this mindset becomes a appreciable part of the infrastructure. The elephants are going to exist. Part of the elephant story is a good story, like the things with base load and grid stability and demand response and all that. I mean, we can participate in that a little bit, but that's really something that they can do well. But I'll go back to this article again. Anybody that's really kind of wants to geek out on this stuff, go look up the article.
We'll have it in the
But
show notes. Send
yeah,
it to me after this.
okay. But what I've essentially done is I went through this game theory thing. The reason I started thinking about some of the specifics, and there's a lot of math in that article, is that when the China mining ban happened, I think as everybody knows, like the network bounced back in a very resilient manner. Like I think we were all like, wow, isn't that awesome? And it is, that we lost 50 to 60% of the hash power like overnight. And other than the block time drifting down to like 15 to 18 minutes for a week or two, it just bounced back, and like isn't that cool? But I went through the mental exercise of saying, well, how big would the drop have had to be to really create a problem? And what I determined is that if the drop was at 85%, it would really start creating problems. And I'm not talking about like 51% attack sort of stuff. What I'm talking about is like block times getting so long that the network kind of freezes everything. Lightning channels can't open and close, remittances can't be made, UTXO consolidation can't, like all these sort of things that like kind of grind to a halt. And as long as we can keep, what I'll say is like if we can keep about 15% or more of the network in the hands of the horses and the rabbits, and we can keep at least 15% in what I call wild mining or off-grid mining, then I think we as a community and an ecosystem have the resiliency that we can take a blow where something happens to all the elephants and the horses and the rabbits can carry the load. But we can't take a 95 or 99% hit. Like that, I think that would be catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the incentives keep us away from those thresholds. I don't think like we're close to that, and there are people like you acting right actively to
Yeah.
change the dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I, you mentioned that you had just put a tweet thread about block space and scarcity. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Much like with the China mining ban, I've been doing a lot of thinking since the ordinal thing happened, and um, I've had some realizations, and I just put a little piece out earlier today, and this is the realization. We got to do just a tiny bit of math. So block times right now run just under 10 minutes. The average over the last year is actually 9:49. Anybody interested? 9 minutes and 49 seconds is the average, okay? That means that 146 and a half blocks per day are processed by the network. And if you multiply that by 365, you end up with 53,500 blocks per year. Now, the max probably transactions per block is probably about 4,000. So we're probably more like 2,500 right now is the average, but I think we'll probably see 4,000 if we were really crowded all the time. It'd be like 4,000. So you take 4,000 transactions per block times 53,500 blocks in a year, and you get 214 million transactions. That's the capacity of the network. Now, there's 8 billion people in the world. If we reach the point where even 10% of the people have Bitcoin, that's 800 million people. And we only have 214 million base layer transactions available per year. So meaning only one of every 4 people could even do one transaction on average with the base layer every year. So I started thinking about this going, well, that's really a problem because I'm not even counting companies and things like that in there as well. And what I really realized was that we as a community for the last 14 years have had the privilege of interacting with the most secure financial network ever created at will for essentially for free. And there's a lot of behaviors that I think we've gotten used to as a community as a result of that. We tell people, get your coins off of exchanges. I agree with that, right? Not your keys, not your coin. I agree with that. But we also have to understand that if the people involved with Bitcoin go up, that this block space is going to become precious at a level that I don't think people are appreciating. I've come up with a metric. I call it an ABSAR, and it stands for what's the A? No, I forgot that ABSAR. Damn it, what's it called? Block space ratio. Anyway, it's block space access ratio is for some reason I'm drawing a blank on the A, and I created it. But anyway, it's basically this. You take the number of Bitcoin transactions annually. Oh, annual block space access ratio, annual block space ABSAR. Okay, so it's the number of annualized transactions divided by the number of users. So right now we're doing about 150 million transactions per year, and we've got, I don't know, let's say there's 75 million users, so the score is 2. I believe in the next year we could see that cross cross over. Like we double the number of users in the next year. Now we're at a ratio of 1. It will tend over time towards 0, right? Because the number of users will trend toward infinity, but the count can't change. So the block scarcity is going to be phenomenal. And I think we also have to remember that, and this is a mind-boggling thing to me as a miner, in 5 years, 5 years from today, the block reward is going to be the block subsidy is going to be 1.5 Bitcoin. In less than 10 years, it's going to be 0.75 Bitcoin. So what it
95
means,
years will be 37 sats.
right? Yeah, obviously. So and I think you've tweeted about that recently. I saw that. Well, what does it mean? It means that the network still has to be secured. It will be secured, but also given the thing I just talked about, like block space, there's just not enough for everybody, frankly. And I know this will probably scare the shit out of people, and I'm going to do some math that I'll publish behind this, but I think we're headed probably within the decade to transaction fees that average transaction fees probably approaching $1,000, something on that order. And so if you don't start preparing for it now, UTXO consolidation, you want to run coin joins, do it now. You have a wallet that has 300,000 sats in it. Well, you better consolidate that with something else or get it off of the base layer to somewhere else, because you could get economically trapped. There's a lot of these sort of things that I think are important. And I know this is going to sound sacrilege to a lot of people, but if we're at the point where the average person maybe gets access to the base layer once every 1 to 4 years, we're going to have custodial solutions that people trust. We're going to have Lightning working properly, or other layer 2 solutions. And this concept that everybody should learn how to interact with the base layer, but the math is not going to allow everybody to do that. And there's a great quote, and the quote is this: "A luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity." And Bitcoiners for 14 years have had the luxury of getting access to the base layer whenever they want for free, and that's about to end. And so I'm saying this today because I just want to let people know, like, you have a window, and that window could be a year, 6 months, a year, 2 years. It's probably not much longer than that when this is going to be a whole different ballgame.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think you're 100% right on the timeline, and I like that you bring up necessity, because I think necessity is the mother of all inventions, and I think you're 100% right on the magnitude of the math. But on top of that, there's the the human ingenuity that is going to come forth because of the absolute scarcity of block space and the necessity to leverage that secure base layer. I think we just can't comprehend what humans are going to build on this network,
Yeah.
and how they're going to solve these problems, and that's super bullish to me. But whenever there's like Bitcoin critics who are like, oh, not enough people are using the blockchain, like the economics are going to break down, really my response is either it works or it doesn't, and if it works, like, there's not enough block space. Like, that's not a problem. That's
yeah.
not a problem.
No, as a miner, I'm not worried about long-term mining economics. I do not lose sleep over it. Uh, you know, different people can debate ordinals, right? But what thrilled me about the ordinal situation was it proved the thing I'm just talking about, like how close we are to this block space scarcity. And now, and I know a lot of people were saying, well, we got to kick the ordinals people off and blah, blah, blah. I'm telling you, folks, it doesn't matter, because the tidal wave is coming. It's a tsunami, and it will.
The tsunami will kick out the ordinals people.
Yeah. I mean, there's just no way that's gonna. Do not worry about it. Don't lose sleep over it. Don't waste time sending tweets telling ordinals people they suck and whatever. You're just wasting your time. It doesn't matter. But
We're laughing at you.
yeah,
Especially me.
yeah. So get your but I said get your shit in order, because I know there's Bitcoin pure. I'm a maxi, by the way. So but I'm also a numbers guy, and that's the reason I'm sharing this. 214 million transactions per year. That's it. And it probably won't,
8 billion people on Earth.
and 8 billion people on Earth. So you do the math. Now you decide, like, how the hell am I going to do this? So the having something on chain is like, that's very precious, right? And getting anything on or off there, you're gonna pay a luxury tax for doing that. And that's just the way it is. And so, support your Lightning development companies and the LSPs. Figure out what custody solution you might be comfortable with that's third party related, as an intermediate. Because I think what you're going to have is you're going to have, like, truly long term storage stuff that you're holding generational. This is at an individual level, right? Your generational wealth, your long term stuff. Yes, get it on chain, but you're going to have other layers, where you hold your Bitcoin, and there's going to be a certain uncomfortableness with that, and you're going to have to figure out how to protect yourself. And as you said, I think it will spawn innovation, though. That's what's great. People will figure out ways of, this is business opportunities for people. So if you're looking for a space out there to innovate in, there you go.
No, I mean, absolutely. Bob, I'm gonna have to have you back on the show. There's so many good nuggets and stories, and I love your ability to break down the numbers there. It makes it really clear just how scarce Bitcoin's block space is. For one, I'm bullish. I'm not concerned whatsoever. I think if anything, all of us are bears, and so we should take our wildest predictions and adjust to the upside, because if Bitcoin works, none of us can really comprehend, what's going to come next. Bob, want to give you a last word. There's been a great conversation.
Well, thank you. A pleasure being on here. I don't have a lot to say here, other than, we're all privileged, I think, to be in this place. I mentioned it before. I'll give credit to my wife. You know what my wife said to me as an older guy? She said, when you got back into this space, your aura changed, your light changed, your energy changed. And I think all of us who are involved in this should really look at this as a privilege, and attack it as a chance to make the world a better place. And obviously, you can make a lot of money, but do things for the right reasons. I've certainly learned that, and the money will come. And I'm trying to do that with the remaining years of my professional life. I'll probably do this till I die, honestly. But it's a pleasure to talk to you today, CK. And we're here whenever you want. So I'd be happy to come back sometime.
Awesome. Well, Bob, thanks again for coming on. Thanks for sharing the wisdom. I want to thank you for being a long-term supporter of the print magazine, one of our top advertisers. So you've been a part of making this awesome piece of Bitcoin history possible since, the very beginning. Here is the second issue on the remake, and there you go. There's a Barefoot Mining ad too. So, from the El Salvador issue on, Barefoot has been an awesome supporter of the mag. Bob, well, I think I got cut off, but thanks again for coming on. And to everyone watching, make sure to follow Bob on Twitter. Make sure to go read his recent thread. Make sure to follow me on Twitter. I am on Twitter, and I'm going to be going to Bitcoin Amsterdam. And I am excited to meet all the European Bitcoiners out there. So see you very soon, October 12th through the 13th. And enjoy the show. Smash the like button and subscribe too. Peace.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.
Thank you, fellow Bitcoiners. You brought Bitcoin to the global stage.
Bitcoin came and Bitcoin was not expected by anybody.
Joining our 3-day ride on a mission of hyper-Bitcoinization with brilliant minds that raised the bar worldwide.
But it goes far deeper than that.
You listened to different angles and seen various perspectives. You dared to stand up and speak out.
If you love somebody, tell them to buy Bitcoin.
You were there to learn, teach, and inspire. Discovered opinions and arise with vision.
And everything less than that is pure madness.
You came together to collaborate and celebrate, side by side, for the greatest financial innovation. You came to Amsterdam, and you made history.
That's one small step for man,